Hello everyone, this is Cobalt. This is the next video in my character analysis series for Brawlhalla. Stick around till the end to hear about entering the giveaway to win community colors, emotes, weapon skins, sidekicks, avatars, or even the battle pass, and voting for the next legends. And if you want to skip all this and get straight into the information, there's a timestamp in the description, and don't forget to subscribe so you can keep up with the release of your favorite legend. In these analyses, I wanted to focus solely on the character's signatures. Light attack combos are covered much more in depth than I ever could elsewhere and function pseudo-comparably for all characters of that weapon class. So I'm not going to be discussing the general neutral of the character with their weapons unless it pertains in some way to their signatures. Firstly, I want to give clear descriptions of the terminology I'll be using. Startup frames are the amount of frames that happen after a move has begun until the first hitbox of the move becomes active. Active frames are the duration of frames that the move contains hitboxes that can collide with your opponent. FAF, or First Actionable Frame, is the first frame available where your character is able to move again after the move has been started. For all of this data, I use the character's jump to display the first actionable frame. Lastly, on miss refers to the move not connecting with an opponent, and on hit refers to the move making contact with an opponent. I'm going to be doing my analysis today on the next voted in legend, Val. Val is an android assassin who became sentient. She grew to learn about emotion and being human. She infiltrated a band as their bass player. I don't have time. Moving on. She ran Miami and then became sort of a company owner for most of the corporations that make money. This is not the way that I envisioned an android assassin turning out. Anyway, moving on. Val's weapons are sword and gauntlets. She's seen some solid results competitively, and it has been that way for quite a while. She's always been a solid character selection for any competitor, both with sword and gauntlets being good viable weapons in the metagame for most of the game's lifespan. She has a rising stat spread, with 4 attack, 5 dexterity, 6 defense, and 7 speed. This makes her a character with good mobility that has slightly lacking in power. Though her weapon's consistency with kill confirms off of downlight certainly help her out in this department. So, do her SIGs make up for this lower amount of power? Well, let's find out. Let's start with her sword. Sword's side SIG has 16 frames of startup, active frames from 17 to 21 and 30 to 36 with an FAF of 60. It functions the same on miss as it does on hit. Val does a front flip forward before dashing forward with a slice from her blade. This move has a pretty good amount of startup and about average amounts of end lag. Additionally, if performed via gravity canceling off stage into a wall, she'll run up the wall with a slash, which can be beneficial for deterring against edge guarding and ledge trapping. This SIG has reasonable utility and good coverage in front of her thanks to its fast startup and travel distance, can effectively catch opponents off guard as a burst option or effective punish option from a distance. It has really good mobility to it, which is one unique thing about most of her SIGs, honestly. The SIG is really cool, unique, and I like it a lot. Sword neutral SIG has 14 frames of startup, active frames from 15 to 22 with an FAF of 47. It functions differently on miss than it does on hit. Should the first hit connect, it converts into a second hit with active frames from 37 to 44 with a new FAF of 65. Val jumps upward with a sword swing. If the first hit connects, it converts into a second hit where she changes direction and strikes with a second strike that sends her opponent flying. This SIG has the lowest amount of startup of any SIG on her kit, and it has really good FAF on miss. It's great at catching jumping opponents or those attempting to recover high. This SIG is really effective at its job, and it has solid active frames given its low startup. Overall, a really good SIG on her kit in my opinion. Sword down SIG has 16 frames of startup, active frames from 17 to 21 and 28 to 41 with an FAF of 66. It functions differently on miss than it does on hit. On hit, the second duration of active frames extends from 28 to 41 up to 28 to 65 with a new FAF of 86. Val breakdances in place, swinging her sword around her for a pretty long duration. The startup on this move is pretty good, and it has a high FAF as well thanks to the lengthy active frames and animation, but sometimes a lingering hitbox is worth that trade. It's excellent at catching through spot dodges since it lasts so long, and it has reasonable disjoints as well as hitboxes surrounding her. This is the only SIG on her kit that doesn't involve some type of movement as well. Next up is her gauntlets. Gauntlet's side SIG has 17 frames of startup, active frames from 18 to 30 and 36 to 41 with an FAF of 62. It functions the same on miss as it does on hit. Val charges forward with her gauntlets outstretched, generating hitboxes in front of her, culminating in a final burst of energy that often catches people even if the initial dashing hitboxes don't. It has solid coverage in front of her and has a decent startup. Its FAF is a little low, so it's kind of punishable in a similar fashion to her sword side SIG, but its mobility can help to prevent this at times. Not her best SIG in my opinion, but not a terrible one by any stretch. Gauntlet's neutral SIG has 17 frames of startup, active frames from 18 to 29 and 43 to 55 with an FAF of 74. It functions the same on miss as it does on hit. Val jumps upwards, her gauntlets detaching from her hands as she ascends before slamming back down with her gauntlets close behind, landing with a crash. The SIG has some solid mobility and can dip down below stage at ledge to spike opponents. I've seen it used via gravity canceling off stage into the wall to create an effective edge guarding tool. It scoops up opponents really well, and if the opponent spot dodges during the upward swing, they can still be hit by the second. It's definitely got its utility, but it has a pretty high FAF, though the end lag on it isn't terrible, but use it well since you can be punished pretty hard for it if you miss. Gauntlets down sig has 25 frames of startup, active frames from 26 to 38 with an FAF of 55. It functions differently on miss than it does on hit. On hit, the move converts into a second hit with active frames from 52 to 56 and a new FAF of 71. Val jumps backwards before throwing out a large, electric-looking shuriken. If the first hit connects, Val dashes forward and extends an upward punch. This sig is pretty good at edge guarding since the shuriken can extend past the ledge, but the knockback angle is not necessarily the best for this since it sends them upward. It's got slow startup due to the travel distance and a reasonable FAF on miss. It's an excellent punish option for approaching opponents, and the animation for it looks really cool. So overall, her sigs are honestly pretty good. They all have 17 frames or less in terms of startup, though the FAF on most of these moves is rather average or above average. Though her sigs are unique in the mobility that each of them offer her. She's a very agile character, and her sigs reflect that as well, with all but one of them offering her movement options that can improve her stage position. They offer her solid coverage in front of her and above her. I think that her sword sigs offer slightly better coverage thanks to their range and hitboxes, but her gauntlet sigs are certainly not bad. She's a pretty combo-heavy character with both her weapons, and her sigs are beneficial at mixing it in with reads and dodge options. Sword neutral sig after a neutral dodge on D-Light, for example. Each of her sigs has some good utility to it, so I think she's pretty good. I'm certain that she has many more good competitive results to come, so we'll have to stay tuned and see. Today's code to put down in the comments is Genos, along with your Twitter handle, and if you get that reference, I appreciate it. I'll be streaming live on Twitch shortly after this video goes live, so be sure to check that out in the link below. Tune in tomorrow for coverage on the next highest voted legend from this week. Comment to vote for next week's 5 legends. I'll be continuing this once a day, Monday through Friday, over the next 10 weeks until all 50 legends are covered, so thanks for joining me on this ride. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the release of your favorite legend, and hope to see you back for the next one. Once again, I'm Cobalt, and thanks for watching.